circumstances have ripened for us to do the review courses, it seems. So there are 3 review courses. This is the first in a series of 3 review courses. We've done, what, 165 classes so far, I guess? Those of you who have been here. I've done 165 classes. In any case, we've gone through 15 different courses and topics. So in our review series this year, we'll take this year to review those 15 courses. And those 15 courses represent what a geshe or a doctor of philosophy in Buddhism would learn at a Buddhist monastery, a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. So it would take a Tibetan monk 18 years of study to go through the material. We've obviously condensed it. But it's the essential information. It's really the nut and the core of the material. Right? So this is a precious opportunity to distill down the distilled down material. It's really the essence of the material. Right? So we went through all the major books of Buddhism. There are 5 great books of Buddhism. Right? There's the Perfection of Wisdom. Right? There's the Abhidharma. There's Pramana, or a study of logic and valid perception. Right? What else?
Vinaya.
Ethics, yeah. Ethics. Yeah, there's Vinaya, a study of valid morality and ethics, right? And then we threw in, did we say middle way?
We didn't say Madhyamika.
In the middle way, Madhyamika. And we threw in Lamrim as a 6th topic for good measure. So in Lamrim, it is the overview of the entire Buddhist path in an organized, step-by-step presentation. So there's something like 3,000 or 4,000 translated pages that we've been through in the reading material that we've done. So, we did, 3 courses a year, I guess?
Roughly.
Something like that.
Sometimes more than, yeah.
It's just a long time. So now we're going to go through, whereas before it took 3 months to go through a course, now we're going to go through a course in 2 classes. Right? So much more concentrated, much more intense. When I was thinking about the review class, I thought, it'll be nice, we'll just review a few light concepts. I'll get to talk a lot, I'll get to say what I want to say, give my opinion, But then when I looked at the material, I thought, not so much. So it's very dense, and there are a lot of important concepts to include, and we'll cover them at a high level. And I encourage you to ask whatever questions you have. But keep in mind, this is really touching upon main points. Which is not to say you shouldn't ask. You should, by all means, still ask whatever you want to ask. Right? But the material exists where you can go and delve into detail on your own whenever you want to. Thanks to Matt, a nice new website. It was beautiful. Thanks to G. G and Matt. And so, you can go back and look at the materials if you really want to delve into anything in more detail. Right? Okay. So, I encourage you to do the readings and to do the homework and to do the quizzes. For those of you who don't know, the course structure is such that each class has a reading associated with it. There's a homework to complete associated with each class, and then there's a quiz to take when you commit at the beginning of the class in the next week. Right? And then we have a final at the end of the series. Okay? So I would encourage you to do that. It's really a precious opportunity and a rare opportunity to make sure you have the essential concepts of Buddhism. This is really all the essential core concepts of Buddhism. I don't anticipate teaching it again. Why not? Because Hector's doing it. And I believe Maria Petrona is going to start. Perhaps. It looks like, could be.
Yeah. Saturdays.
Perhaps. Working out the logistics and the details, but Hector is 2/3 of the way through teaching the series, and for those people who haven't gotten all the material, Maria Petrona has kindly agreed to start with course number 1 and go through the series. So I encourage you to take that opportunity if you haven't also. So feel free to be in touch with me if you have any questions. My email address, if you want it, ready, is Vajra, V-A-J-R-A-Y-O @AOL.com. Yeah, V-A-J-R-A-Y-O @AOL.com. So, don't be shy. Feel free to just email if you have a question about something, or if you need further elaboration, or if you'd like to just talk about anything. Okay? So the idea being that anyone who's been through the 15 courses and these 3 review courses should be, eventually should be quite a good teacher of Buddhism. Right? That's the intention, right? So you should be equipped to have a really good future, You should know the information backwards and forwards after you've been through all this, and you should be in really good shape to be able to undertake retreats of your own. Right? When you go into, where's it saying, who, me?
He was nominating me. Sorry.
Yeah, I or we are going to expect some people to teach after they've been through a condensed 18-course series, which is equivalent to the Cliff Notes of 18 years in a monastery. Right? Some people should perhaps step up and begin teaching and helping those around them. Right? That's the intention of doing all this, is to pass the lineage and to enable people to then go to a cafe together, talk to your friends, help your friends, share the ideas, share the philosophy, share the principles, which can help them improve their lives, right? So, okay, that's the idea. So this is a very beautiful foundation for retreat for those of you who anticipate doing retreat. If you're going to do retreat, it's extremely important to have the subject matter under your belt to be able to do retreat. Okay? So we'll kick off. So tonight and next week we're going to cover the first of the 15 courses, which are the Long Rim subject. It's the principal teachings of Buddhism. Okay. And normally I write Tibetan on the board, but there are Thangkas and not a board, so I'll perhaps just say Tibetan quickly, and you can try to write it down or not as you choose.
You can get your board if you want.
Nah, it's what you want. I'll tell you, let me just try to bleed through the Tibetan and you can see how you feel. If anyone's really has a burning desire to be aware of it or record it, we can accommodate. Okay. So this is called the principle. This course was called the Principal Teachings of Buddhism. It comes from a very famous book, which is only 3 or 4 pages long. It was written by Jesu Kappa, who was born in 1357 and lived until 1419. And Jesu Kappa was the teacher of the first Dalai Lama, and he taught this, he wrote this for one of his disciples. He sent one of his disciples off. It's like if you have a teacher and you ask your teacher what you should do, right? And then they tell you. Well, this disciple asked, I suppose, asked Jesu Kappa what he should do, and Jesu Kappa said, go out to the remote areas of Tibet and found 108 monasteries, and then come back when you're done. And he did. So his name was Sako Wangpo, which means the friar from Sako. It's an area of Tibet. And Jesu Kappa sent him out into the wilderness to establish Buddhism and found monasteries and ordained monks. And so when he was out there, he wrote a letter to Jesu Kappa saying, would you please offer me your guidance and advice? And Jesu Kappa wrote a letter back to him, which gave him his advice. So, the whole point of these teachings, the whole point of the Long Rim and these courses really is to be able to understand ultimate reality, the ultimate nature of reality, the ultimate nature of existence, which in Buddhism is called emptiness. So all of our studies and all of our practices are directed at being able to have a direct perception of highest ultimate reality. Right? And so that's our goal here, and that's our basic goal in this lifetime. If you're able to do that, then it changes your fundamental nature as a being, and you have certain direct experiences and realizations. You directly perceive your own enlightenment in the future. You directly encounter a Buddha. You see the truth of all the Buddhist teachings. You realize the meaning of all thousands of scriptures. So it's a very important spiritual accomplishment. So it's like hundreds of thousands of pages of scriptures, are immediately accessible to you and easily comprehensible to you. And so it's an experience which lasts about 20 minutes. It's a result of deep study and deep meditation. And that's one of the primary reasons why we're doing these courses and classes is to study this material and to give people the basis to be able to understand and meditate upon higher reality and hopefully directly realize it and experience it themselves. Right? So that's the idea. That's the point of these courses. And that experience is only possible through intense study and deep meditation, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours. And so, that's why we're going to go through this material this year, is to try to really drill it in and try to really provide what you need so that when you get into these deep meditation states, you can focus properly. Okay, so three principal paths. The first is renunciation. And now this is principle as in Principal, principle or PLE? PLE, yeah. So three principal paths, as in, these are not paths as in the road before you. When people think about paths, they often think about the path not taken, road less traveled, that sort of thing. This is not that kind of path. This is a path, a principal path as in a state of mind, okay, a realization or a state of mind. A mental condition, right? Something that you achieve in your mind. So when they say principle, they mean the primary path or primary mental conditions. So three mental conditions which are essential to obtain or gain to make progress in your spiritual path. Okay. All right. So I'd like to give a little bit of the lineage. So Jason Kappa wrote this book, 3 or 4 pages long, for Tsako Wangpo. Normally we work from commentaries. The root texts tend to be quite dense, and because they're centuries old or 1,000 years old, the language and the meaning is usually lost to us, or often lost to us. So there tend to be a series of commentaries where 300 years later someone's explaining, oh, this is what he meant 300 years ago. And then 300 years later someone else is explaining what that commentary meant. And 300 years later it happens again. So we're using a commentary by Pamokpa Rinpoche Dechin Ningpo. He was born in 1878 and lived through 1941. He's a very famous Lama. His tantric name was Dechin Ningpo. So these are the main ideas you have to get straight in your mind to get enlightenment. So, what does enlightenment mean, right? What happens if you get these three spiritual traits in your mind? Essentially, it's an end to suffering, right? The reason we're here, the reason we're doing these classes is to alleviate suffering in ourselves and those around us. Yeah? So, the point is that if we can put an end to suffering for ourselves and for others, be fairly paradisical, right? And that's our goal, is to attain paradise, nirvana, enlightenment. So, if we, in our lives, we're normally striving for whatever good stuff we can get, right? Typically it's money, it's relationships, it's place to live, car, good job, good family, good friends, right? And and from a Buddhist perspective, one would say, add up all the good things in your life, right? What's the best that you can possibly hope for? What's the best life that one can attain? Well, you have a great position, maybe you owning or running a company, you have a lot of money in the bank, great partner, or great relationship, great place to live, an environment, right?
Hair.
Yeah, hair. Just on your face.
In the right place.
In the right place. Hair in the right place. Yeah. So, these are the things we live for, right? These are all the things that we get out of bed in the morning for. We get out of bed in the morning because we want stuff. We want to get things, right? And it's generally this stuff, okay? So, for most of us, in an ordinary sense, it doesn't occur to us that we're going to lose it all. You know, when we die, somewhere along the way, we're going to lose it all, and that our entire life's energy is spent collecting things that we're destined to lose and we're bound to lose. Right? And so, from a Buddhist perspective, if you believe that there's anything more, if you believe that you exist beyond this life, if you believe there's more to existence than just one life, it's fairly short-sighted. You know, it's fairly limited to say I'm going to put all my time and energy into getting things, you know, which I'm going to lose, guaranteed, right? And putting very little time into things which are going to stay with me for a very long time, perhaps for multiple lifetimes, or for many years, or long into the future, many eons, whatever you want to call it. So. You know, all the things we strive for, like, you know, I have kids, so it's like, well, I gotta save money, get a house, leave the whatever, right? They just spend it. You know, how long does it take for, like, you know, after you die, how long does it take for, you know, for the kids to, like, sell the house and spend the money, right? Not very long. So, it happens pretty quickly, typically. So anyway, we don't think about it because it's a little bit depressing, right? I mean, we don't go through life thinking everything that I spend my entire life working for is just going to be lost. And, you know, you get a little depressed if you think about it, right? What am I going through my days for? What am I spending my life energy on? I'm spending my life energy on all these things which are destined to disappear, right? And to be lost either sooner or later. You know, best case scenario, you can hold on to them to the time of your death, right? Typically, they don't last that long. Typically, you lose them along the way somewhere before then, right? So, anyway, you know, it's funny because we think in terms of stuff, but even our own identity, right? We don't typically think about, what about my identity? What about John? What about me, right? It's like even my name and even my identity will be lost, right? It's like there are pictures, you know, the kids, the grandkids, the great-grandkids, you know, they look at the picture and they say, who's that? I say, I don't know. I mean, I did it not long ago, you know, I was looking at my grandmother's pictures, she's got her picture albums, right? And I'm looking at these pictures, these old, faded, you know, sepia pictures, and I'm going like, who are these people? And they're like, oh, that's your great Uncle Bill, and I'm like, I don't care, throw it away. Right? I mean, this is destined to occur for all of us. And so, from a Buddhist perspective, it's important that we have awareness of this, you know, as we live our lives. Not to get depressed, and not to say like, oh, woe is me. That is a little depressing. Think that after I die within, you know, 100 or 200 years, nobody will even know that I existed, right? Even in the best case scenario, right? But the point is to really refocus our priorities and refocus our energies in what we're thinking about and what we're doing with our life. And that's, from a Buddhist perspective, that's why it's important to be aware of these things, right? So, I mean, most of us don't think that, I don't know, it's just somewhere along the way we're going to stop aging and retain everything good that we have. But we live that way. It's just there's a sense of, like, I'm working to get things, and I'll get them, and I'll have them, and they'll stick, and it'll just be like that way forever until the end, right? There's somehow in our mind there's this sense of it's all going to work out forever, right? Which is a little delusional, right? But I think that's how most of us go through our lives. And when it's not working out, you know, we're just like, just got to get it back to the place where it is working out, hold it there, and keep it all, hold it all together, you know. But it doesn't work that way, right? So, being aware of this is renunciation. You know, having awareness that, having awareness that we're spending our life energy, our time, our resources, you know, every waking moment essentially, striving to get things which won't last and which are impossible to keep, you know, is kind of crazy. You know, it's kind of a silly thing to do. You know, and so the awareness that it's a bad use of our time, you know, the awareness that there's a better way to live, there are more important things to do with our time and energy and our resources, is the idea behind renunciation. You know, stop wasting our life, stop wasting our time, stop wasting our energy on things which we must lose, guaranteed. Absolutely. Just a question of sooner or later. And start spending time and energy and resources on things which last and which have a higher value and a higher purpose and a higher meaning, right? So, one can be a business person, one can be in a normal job, one can have a normal life and family and kids until have renunciation. No problem. As human beings, we live our lives. And it's not about whether we're going out and pounding spikes on the railroad to lay railroad tracks, or doing derivatives arbitrage, or working at a cafe. And the point is what's our attitude? What's our mental state? What is it that we're thinking about while we're doing these things? What is the attitude which shapes our behavior and shapes our interactions and shapes our lives? As we're going through the day and as we're going through our routines, what are we thinking about? Is our day filled with the thought of me, gotta get, craving, or is it filled with some kind of higher spiritual ideas and some kind of higher spiritual ideals, right? So no problem to have the job and the family and everything else. But having the idea that I've got to find a higher purpose before I die is renunciation. Renunciation is saying I have to find higher purpose, higher truths, higher things, higher meaning, answers, spiritual answers before I die. And that's really the purpose of my life. And that's really the goal of my life. And that's what I should be spending my time and energy on. Thinking like that is having renunciation. Right? So, and that's the first of the three principal paths. That's the first of the three mental states that one needs to have to be able to make progress on a spiritual path. Right? So, it's recognizing that only spiritual things are important, really. And all the things which we normally fixate on and focus and dedicate our life to are quite transient and impermanent, and we're gonna lose them sooner or later. It's just a question of when, right? So, what's the alternative, right? If we're not going to just think about what can I get and what can I consume, how can I earn and consume, then what are we going to think about, right? That's the second thing that one has to have in their mind, the second principle path, which is called a wish for enlightenment. It's called Janju Samke. It's bodhicitta, sometimes called enlightened mind. But it really refers to the wish for enlightenment. It's the second path, or the second mental state that one needs to attain or cultivate in their mind to make spiritual progress. So, is there anything wrong with wanting money? No. Is there anything wrong with wanting a nice house? No. The Dalai Lama was the richest man in Tibet. He had a palace with 400 rooms, and gold and the rest, servants. But he said, I don't want anything except my Vajra and belt. The rest is not mine. It's the only things that are my possessions. The rest is just there to help people and serve people and benefit people, right? So, the second path is the wish to get enlightened so you can help other people. Now, what does it mean to get enlightened, right? Essentially, we want to attain a very blissful, happy, joyous, ecstatic state, which is perpetual, which continues forever, with the love in our hearts that we want to help other people and help other people attain the same state. So, it's this feeling that I want every living being to be happy. I want every living being to be free of every suffering. I want every living being to, be in paradise or heaven or enlightened or an enlightened state or whatever you want to call it, right? So it's this sort of very high, joyous, ecstatic state of mind. So, some people say, well, you can only help people if you stay here and feed them and clothe them. From a Buddhist perspective, much more important to get enlightened yourself, to work to become enlightened yourself, because if you are a high spiritual being, you can emanate countless forms. You can read people's minds. You know their future. You know their past. Much easier to help someone if you can read their mind. if you know what's going to happen to them in, a day or a week or a year or 50 years or 50 lifetimes, right? So from the perspective of really being able to help living beings, very important to aspire to attain your own paradise and your own enlightenment so that you can help end the suffering of every other living being, right? I mean, an enlightened being can emanate trillions of bodies on any world, any realm, any planet, Half the people in the subway that you met today may have been emanations of an enlightened being, Half of all the people that you grew up with could be emanations of an enlightened being. And they're very patient, they're very skillful, always trying to teach us and lead us and, bring us up from negativity and ignorance, many skillful means. So that's what bodhicitta means. It's the thought that I want to become a Buddha or enlightened so that I can help other people, right? And that's the second path, the second principal path, or the second sort of mental state that one has to come to and attain to really make significant spiritual progress, right? So they go hand in hand, right? If I'm only thinking about myself all the time, like I want, I need, I'm not thinking about other people. Obviously, I'm more thinking about me, right? So if I'm thinking like, look, I want my own happiness, I want my highest happiness forever, it naturally leads to the second state of mind, which is I want that highest happiness for everyone. And it's not some kind of how to say it. It's really a natural progression. It's really an altruistic extension in that if one is cultivating an inner state of happiness, joy, and peace within oneself, it's quite natural that it would suffuse those around one, right? That it's almost a contradiction of terms to say, I want my own happiness and my own peace and my own joy and my own love and my own ecstasy, and screw everybody else. I mean, you can see the contradiction of the thought process. They're really opposing thoughts. So, one really naturally supports the other and leads to the other. And so, which then leads to the third state of mind, or the third principal path, which is called Yamdakvetawa, which is emptiness, a correct view of emptiness, a pure worldview, a pure view of reality. So each of these three concepts supports and leads to the next. If you're thinking, I want to be happy all the time, I don't want to suffer, it naturally bleeds over into, I want other people to be happy all the time, and I don't want other people to suffer. And if you're thinking pure thoughts about yourself and everyone else in existence, then it naturally supports and, in a way, flows into, a correct, pure view of reality. Right? If one is thinking loving thoughts and compassionate thoughts towards every living being, the mind is already cleaning itself and is quite pure and is quite refined, right? Which is then a natural basis to have a pure view of the world and reality, and to be able to perceive and penetrate into higher reality. So you can see how one leads to the next, and they all work together in a more progressive way, right? So anyway, the third path, or the third level of realization that you have to get in this life is to understand emptiness or ultimate reality. And you have to understand what correct view means, and have a correct understanding of emptiness, and see things based upon an understanding of emptiness. And we'll talk about it. But this worldview of emptiness explains all of the events and all of existence. It's a way of seeing the world, and it's a way of thinking of the world, and it's a way of understanding the world, which is very different from our normal, ordinary, conventional way of thinking and relating to the world, right? And so we'll get into it and we'll talk about it. So you can't really be a Buddhist if you don't study correct worldview. Why do things happen? Why am I here? What causes things, right? Are there future lives, or aren't there future lives? So these three principal paths turn you into an enlightened being. If one is following these three principal paths, it's almost a natural byproduct that one will become an enlightened being. It's a natural progression and natural flow, you can almost say, where one evolves spiritually and moves into higher spiritual states, right? So, you know, we see tankas of Chenrezig or Tara or whomever, you know, and these are not just pictures, these are representations of holy beings and enlightened beings that exist, you know, and they're representing some kind of mental state, hopefully in the imagery and the iconography. So the goal is to become a pure, holy, enlightened being like those depicted in the Tanka paintings, you know. And so you have to understand what an enlightened being is. I mean, if we're going to say, look, I understand, I want to end all suffering, I understand, I want to be in paradise forever, nirvana, enlightenment, whatever you call it, right? Well, what is that? What does it look like, right? What is it, a holy being? What is an enlightened being, right? So, I mean, because if you're going to aspire to accomplish something, you really want to know what it is, right? You don't want to just say, oh yeah, I want to, never mind. Get it? So, when Chris starts laughing, I know I should stop, okay? So, all right, so I mean, when we talk about ourselves, right, we talk about John or Hector or Stephen, you know, as a human being, I have a body and a mind, right? And those are basically the parts that make me up, right? And the same is true of an enlightened being. You know, enlightened beings, they've got a body and a mind. They've got some other bits too. They have some other parts that we don't have. And so when we talk about the parts of a Buddha or an enlightened being, they're usually, they're sometimes translated as the bodies of a Buddha, but it's a misnomer. When they talk about the Buddha having different bodies, they're actually talking about parts. And it'd be like saying Hector has two bodies. You know, he's got a mind and a physical form. The terminology is misleading. Okay, so we're going to talk about the different parts of an enlightened being. So in Sanskrit, the two parts are called the Rupakaya and the Dharmakaya. In Tibetan, it's Suku and Chuku. So the physical part of the Buddha is called the Suku in Tibetan, and the Rupakaya. And so, you know, an enlightened being has a form body which is completely pure. It can appear in any form, it can emanate in any form. The nature of an enlightened being's form is such that every sensory input is pure bliss. You know, they experience ultimate bliss feeling the breeze. They experience the same ultimate bliss seeing a color. They experience the same ultimate bliss, you know, hearing a car horn, you know, or a scream. So their senses only function in a way, and mind only function in a way to perceive everything as absolute total bliss all the time. And so the nature of an enlightened being or Buddha is that they have a physical body which is blissed out all the time, right? And which can only experience that. Whereas a human body is basically an accident waiting to happen, right? I mean, you know, a normal human body, we've got skin and bones and organ, and you know, you're going to die, you know, maybe when you're old, maybe not, you know, maybe it'll be something internal that kills you, maybe it'll be something external that kills you, you know, it might be one of your organs, you know, it might be some cells that go bad, something stops, something goes haywire. I mean, there's no way to know, right? From a Buddhist perspective, we say the human body is, you know, it's death waiting to happen. The moment you're born, your death is assured. You know, that your birth contains the seeds of your destruction, the seeds of your death. So being born as a human being, you know, is deadly. So that's, you know, that's the human body. Enlightened being's body is different. Even in the human body, in the advanced Buddhist system, the tantric system, the human body has a very subtle aspect and a very subtle element of energies. They're called winds in Tibetan, drops and chakras in Sanskrit. And so in the advanced Buddhist system, there are subtle energies and subtle aspects to the human form which one can't perceive. You know, if you have surgery on your arm, it's not like the surgeon opens you up and he says, "Ooh, nice chakra." You know, it doesn't work that way. It's very subtle energy, and it's not ordinarily perceptible or visible, right? But in the advanced practices, do you want to kill the AC? So I think we're cooled off sufficiently, more than cooled off sufficiently. So in the advanced teachings of Buddhism, the idea is that you have this subtle energetic body, and that subtle energetic body is very much tied to your coarse body and your outer form. So you can transform your outer body, your coarse physical body and mind, by transforming your subtle energies in your subtle body and mind. And it's implicit. Being able to do that is implicitly tied to the fact that your thoughts and your energies are connected. Every time we have a thought, it affects our energies, right? And so when we think these thoughts, like the three principal paths, when we get these states of mind, as described in the three principal paths, it's actually affecting our subtle spiritual body, which is and physical body, which is then resonating and having an effect upon our coarser and grosser physical body, right? And so the more one thinks these thoughts and the more one practices, the more one's subtle body changes and the more one's outer physical body changes. And if one does very concerted practice, very consistent practice, then the changes become quite obvious to the practitioner and to the person, to the point where the subtle energies begin to really physiologically change the coarse body, where it feels healthier and more vibrant and lighter and healthier and happier, as does the mind. And then the more one practices and the more advanced one's practice becomes, the more the coarse outer body becomes subtle itself. You know, the coarse outer body becomes more and more subtle, more like the inner subtle body, such that one becomes a more subtle being, you could say, a more energetic and subtle being, up to the point where one can transform this their nature and their being into a being of light or an angel. In Buddhism, you would call them a tantric deity or something like that, where one can actually transform one's nature and one's mind into something which is very pure and holy as a result of practicing with one's mind. So, and in the tantric system, the advanced system, you can do it in one lifetime. If one's a skilled practitioner and a diligent practitioner, in one lifetime one can physiologically change one's system in that way. Okay, so so that's the physical body of a Buddha is something which is made of light, something which can emanate from the mind, and there are two parts to it really. The Rupakaya. There's the physical body of the Buddha. I guess you would say the subtle body of a Buddha, which is sort of resident in his paradise, or hanging out in his paradise. And then there's the countless emanation bodies, which they can send out to however many realms. And those emanation bodies would look like Stephen or Hector or David or whomever. You wouldn't know because they're able to emanate a pure form, which looks completely valid to us. Okay. So that's the Rupakaya. And then there's the Chukku, the Dharmakaya, which is the other part of an enlightened being, the other part of a Buddha. Okay. So, what's the Dharmakaya made of? There are two things that the Dharmakaya is made of. One is the mind of an enlightened being, right? So we talked about the body, and then you have the mind of an enlightened being, right? So, mind of an enlightened being, millisecond, essentially a millisecond after someone becomes enlightened, they're capable of emanating countless form bodies, right? So A mind of an enlightened being, mind of a Buddha is not omnipotent, but is omniscient. It's not all powerful. You know, an enlightened being doesn't have the capacity to wave a magic wand and end suffering, for example. I mean, otherwise they would have, right? If they're an omnipotent being who could eliminate suffering, who wasn't a masochist, then all suffering would be gone already, right? So a Buddha's mind is omniscient, meaning that they can perceive everything of the past, present, and future in every moment. So every moment of the past, present, and future is obvious to them every second of their awareness, right? They can see everything that ever was, is, or will be in a moment. So that's the nature of their mind. And then the other thing that we left out is the emptiness of those things. That's generally lumped in with the Dharmakaya, right? So the fact that an enlightened being's body and mind have no nature of their own is the other part of the enlightened being, right? Is the other aspect of an enlightened being. So, I mean, what does that mean, right? I mean, what's the emptiness of a Buddha's body? Like, you know, is this an arm and a hand?
Sure.
Yeah, not from its own side, but yeah, to an ordinary person it is. However, depending upon the being perceiving it, it's a different thing. You know, to a fly, it's food or a landing pad or whatever it is. You know, I mean, to a little critter on there, it's, you know, a large field. You know, from a Buddhist perspective, you know, it's potential, right? There is stuff here. There's something there. You can call it energy or matter or a basis or projection. You can call it whatever you want to call it, right? There's something there. I mean, you could do quantum physics and you could say, well, you know, there's energetic potential, which only comes into existence when a perceiver perceives it. And you can think about it in a lot of different ways, right? The point being that what's here is a function of the perceiver. It's not just concretely there by itself from its own side, okay? And so that's the emptiness of my arm, and that's the emptiness of the Buddha's arm and everyone else's arm, okay? It exists in dependence upon the perceiver, observing it in a particular way, right? So when we talk about the emptiness of the Buddha's body, that's what we're talking about, you know? A Buddha perceives itself, him or herself, to be totally pure, right? And totally holy and totally blissed out and totally omniscient, and it's a valid perception for them, right? So if I were an enlightened being, would you necessarily perceive it? No, you know, because this is a basis of perception. You know, this is quantum matter. This is, you know, data. This is stuff which is being perceived and interpreted in a particular way according to a being's mind. And we'll talk about it more later, obviously. But that's the general idea. Okay, that's the emptiness of the Buddha's body or the Buddha's mind, and those are the two parts of the Buddha. So what does that got to do with the three principal paths? You know, how does that tie in with the three principal paths? Well, the first two, having renunciation and bodhicitta, which for enlightenment are a cause for the body of a Buddha. If you get good at renunciation, if you get good in your bodhisattva thinking and feeling, right, then you collect the causes to create a Buddha's body. Okay? Everything is caused. There are specific causes that produce a Buddhist body, and those causes are renunciation and bodhicitta. And then the third of the principal paths, correct view of emptiness, is a cause for an enlightened being's mind, Buddha's mind. So developing a pure, correct view of emptiness provides the basis for obtaining or attaining an enlightened being's mind. Okay? So that's the idea. Those are the two parts of the Buddha, and those are the three principal paths of how they produce the parts of the Buddha. Okay? So you've got to get really good at those three paths, right? You have to recognize that everything that we've pursued in a conventional sense up to now is going to be lost and is pretty much meaningless, right? Pretty much everything we wake up in the morning and strive for is going to be lost. Maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe in a year, maybe in 10 years. So, the second path is just feeling ultimate love and compassion for other people, recognizing that every single person you meet on the subway is having all these same problems. They're going to lose every good thing they have. They're bumping into nasty people perhaps all day long. They're suffering moment to moment, right? And rather than feeling hostile towards them, there's a sense of empathy, a sense of compassion, a sense of pity or love or whatever you want to call it, right? They're all going to die soon, They're all having problems all day long. So, why worry about somebody bumping into you on the subway, when their death is right around the corner, So it's just shifting the perspective and shifting the way of thinking about it, shifting the way we see things, right? And the way we relate to the world. So some kind of empathy there, having some kind of empathy, right? We go through life thinking about I want, right? I need, I want. What's going to happen to me? What if this happens to me? What if this doesn't happen to me? All day long. I want this for lunch. I want to do this later today. I want this to happen tonight. This happen next week. So our mind is just obsessed with this all the time, right? Such that we don't really give two winks of consideration to the people around us, other than if they happen to somehow jar us, somehow intrude upon our sphere of awareness. We're in our own little bubbles, and if they somehow impact our little bubble or intrude upon our little bubble, right, by somehow doing something that we notice and don't like, then, we get irritated, we get annoyed, we get angry, or we have a little sort of a spike of feeling of some kind, right? And maybe it's craving, maybe it's anger, maybe somebody intrudes on our bubble because they're beautiful. It's just I'm thinking like, I want to do this tonight, I want to do that tonight, and you see somebody you're like, wow, they're beautiful, I want that, So it's the same thing. It's just I want. It's not like how might they be happy, how might they have a good life, how might they, have a wonderful encounter with me, So it's sort of this endless, this endless groove that we're in. We're always obsessed with ourselves, right? So from a Buddhist perspective, they're saying you got to stop thinking about all this stuff. You got to have these other two thoughts in your mind, three thoughts in your mind all the time. You got to be thinking all the time, how can I create my highest happiness and other people's highest happiness? With every interaction, with everything that you do, and you got to think like, how can I help the people around me feel good and feel happy and feel better as I get on the subway, and as I get off the subway, and as I get my latte, and as I, blah, 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 all day long, How can I help these people have a better life and a better world and a better experience of me and everything else, right? And how can I see everything, according to an ultimate view, not according to some kind of conventional, the beauty resides there and I must acquire it and consume it view, The goodness resides there and I must somehow make it mine so that I have goodness in me, or whatever it's going to be, right? So that's the point of these three principal paths. And if you get really good at it, then it will transform your mind and it will transform your body into an enlightened tantric deity's body, tantric angel's body, right? And that's the point of practicing Tantra. The mind of an enlightened being is brought about by practicing this correct view. And if you study it long enough, your mind and your brain will transform into that of an enlightened being. And then, as you practice more and as you get closer to these things, you start to have wonderful, miraculous experiences where, inexplicable things happen. You go like, wow, that was far out. That was weird. And there's a whole world we can't perceive right now. Our perception is like 0.1%. Just even the visual spectrum. When they talk about wavelengths of light in the visual spectrum, like our visual perception is like infinitesimally small. I saw a chart one time. It's like the spectrum. If you made it physical, the wavelength of spectrum of light would be like coast to coast in the United States, and the amount that we perceive is like an inch out of that. there's just so much that we can't perceive, even on a scientific basis, And so on a mental basis, on a more profound mental basis, it's vast. There's so much there. So, and as we clean up our mind and become more subtle, then we increase our capacity to perceive things and understand things and experience things, which ordinarily we don't. So, that's the idea of studying these things and studying emptiness. You can see your future lives, you can see your past lives, you can see your future enlightenment. You can meet enlightened beings, but you have to meditate seriously and study seriously. So that's the connection between the three principal paths and the bodies of a Buddha. Okay. We'll take one more thing, and then we'll take a break. People come up and they say, I want a deep practice, I want a holy practice, I want a serious practice. Give me a deep tantric practice. And I say, okay, I'll give you a deep practice. It's called the three principal paths. And people are like, no, I don't want that practice. I want a tantric practice. I want initiation into chakras and vara. I want a heavy practice. I want ruka. I want something meaningful. It doesn't work. It's not like that. If you practice these three things well, then you don't need tantric initiation. You just naturally become an enlightened being. You naturally become a holy being, and you'll meet Vajrayogini, and you'll hang out together, and you'll do things together, and it'll be wonderful, right? So if you keep the three principal paths, you study it well, and you'll be in a tantric realm before you know it. And it's impossible to get there without these three things. You can take as many initiations as you want. You can get bumped on a head with a ritual implement, however many times you want till you get bumps. Nothing's going to happen, unless you're doing the three principal paths well in your mind. So, you can go to the highest Lama with whatever lineage, teaching 16 tantric deities, with 4 initiations every day, and it's not going to go anywhere. It's guaranteed that you won't get any results if you're not practicing the three principal paths. They can have the right bell, and they can wave it in a really cool fashion, and they can make these like cool mudra things with their hands, and like mumble certain things that seem really mystical. It's not going to go anywhere. It doesn't matter how many times you do it if you're not doing the three principal paths. All right. Without these three things, absolutely nothing will happen. And you meet people, they've been practicing tantra for 20 years, and not much has happened because they're just not doing the basic three principal paths. You can say, well, I do my sadhana every day, and I recite and I memorize and I do mantras, and it's like, yeah, but do you think loving thoughts all day long about people? And if not, you're not going to go anywhere. So it's really quite straightforward. And you can have initiations all day long, but if we don't know our vows, and if we don't keep our vows, if we don't have ethics, if we don't have some practice where we're cleaning our mind and making our mind more subtle and more virtuous and more pure, then it's not going to go anywhere, right? So that's it's our praktimoksha vows, our bodhisattva vows, and our tantric vows, right? They're all essential, and it's what drives us to enlightenment, right? All right. So let's take a break, and then when we come back, we'll get into another very important subject matter from the first course, which is the 10 qualities of a qualified spiritual teacher, which is, I get people around me. I remember one time I had somebody call me from Singapore. She's like, oh, we have a spiritual teacher here, and they're ordained, and we're not sure about what they're doing. It seems a little suspect, and maybe they're doing something wrong and taking advantage of everybody, and how do we know? And we'll talk about it when we come back. It's a cliffhanger.